The morning sun cast a warm glow over Saltwater Cove as Jessa Baker, a marine biologist, inspected the day's haul at the docks. The familiar sounds of fishermen hauling in their nets filled the air, but something felt off. She approached the crew and saw a net teeming with slick, black-scaled creatures, fish she had never seen before. Their jagged fins gleamed under the sunlight, and their glassy eyes reflected an eerie red hue. "Ever seen anything like this?" one of the fishermen asked, scratching his head. Jessa knelt beside the net. "No," she whispered, a chill creeping up her spine. "We shouldn't sell these. They're not normal." But the fisherman waved her off, dismissing her concerns. They had a market to supply after all. Little did they know, this was just the beginning. Despite Jessa's urgent warning, the strange fish were taken to the local market. It was a bustling day, with townspeople browsing fresh produce, seafood, and trinkets. The fish quickly sold, unnoticed among the usual selection, as families unknowingly brought the creatures into their homes for dinner. By evening, a subtle shift began to ripple through the town. Seagulls circled above, their shrill cries more frantic than usual. In the shadows, stray cats prowled with an unnerving stillness. Jessa stood at her kitchen window, watching the horizon darken over the sea. She couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible had been set in motion. The next morning, chaos erupted. Jessa rushed to the beach, where a crowd had gathered, watching in horror as seagulls dropped from the sky mid-flight. Their once white feathers fell away in clumps, revealing patches of decaying, discolored skin. A few birds convulsed violently on the sand, their cries weak and distorted. She bent down to inspect one, heart racing. There, in the hollowed flesh, were bulbous growths, something alive beneath the surface. Jessa recoiled in shock. This wasn't a natural disease. Something was infecting the animals, and she feared the source. Later that afternoon, the market descended into confusion. The black-scaled fish had vanished from the stalls, leaving behind a thick, slimy residue that coated the display counters. No one could explain where they had gone. Jessa hurried to the market, her mind racing. She inspected the remains, collecting a sample for further study. The fish, the birds, the cats, whatever was happening, it was spreading. She had to get to the bottom of it before the town suffered more. Back in her lab, Jessa worked late into the night, poring over the fish sample under her microscope. What she found chilled her to the core. The fish carried a parasite, one so aggressive it evolved rapidly with each host. It attacked the cells, multiplying at an alarming rate, reshaping the very biology of its victim. She stared at the writhing mass of parasites in the fish blood sample, her stomach turning. This was no ordinary infection. If it could adapt so quickly, it wouldn't stop at animals. Humans were next. The following morning, Jessa's worst fears came true. In the town square, Mrs. Peabody, the kindly elderly baker, was seen wandering barefoot, her usual smile replaced by a vacant stare. Townspeople gathered around her, trying to help, but as they reached for her, she screamed, a guttural, inhuman sound. Her mouth stretched wide, revealing a thick, pulsating mass of tendrils writhing beneath her gums. The crowd recoiled in horror as Mrs. Peabody collapsed, her body convulsing as the parasite took control. Panic gripped the town as more residents showed signs of infection. The parasite was now inside them, changing them. The once peaceful town of Saltwater Cove became a place of fear and confusion. Townspeople stumbled through the streets, disoriented and violent. Their skin, like the seagulls before them, began to show signs of decay. Memory lapses turned into outbursts of aggression. The infection had taken hold. Jessa barricaded herself in her lab, knowing time was running out. She frantically searched for a way to stop the parasite before it claimed her too. Jessa received word that her mentor, Dr. Elias Corbin, had fallen ill. She rushed to his home, only to find him barely conscious, his once sharp eyes clouded with infection. He reached for her, trembling, his voice weak. "Find the source, Jessa. It's the only way to stop this." His words haunted her as he slipped into unconsciousness. The infection had reached him, but his warning was clear. She had to find where the parasite originated before it consumed the town entirely. Jessa's body betrayed her. She felt sluggish, her limbs heavy, her thoughts clouded. She feared she too was succumbing to the infection. Time was running out, but she couldn't afford to let the parasite win. Armed with a harpoon and her notebook filled with observations, she set out to the fishing docks, where it all began. Saltwater Cove's beach was deserted, the silence deafening. A thick fog rolled in, covering the shoreline in an eerie mist. Jessa approached cautiously, the weight of the harpoon heavy in her hands. The ocean lapped against the shore, its once familiar sound now filled with menace. Dark shapes slithered through the shallow waters, and as Jessa stepped closer, she saw it, a grotesque, bloated creature washed up on the shore. Its pulsating body emitted a faint glow, and Jessa knew she had found the source of the parasite. Jessa's heart raced as the creature began to writhe, its body splitting open. From within, a swarm of parasitic tendrils erupted, surging toward her. She backed away, harpoon at the ready. With a fierce cry, she drove the harpoon into the creature's mass, the impact sending a shockwave through the beach. The creature let out a spine-chilling shriek, convulsing violently as its flesh began to disintegrate. The tendrils shriveled under the sunlight, evaporating into ash. Exhausted, Jessa collapsed onto the sand, watching as the red glow faded from the creature's eyes. The beach fell silent once more. The infection had stopped, for now, but as Jessa stared out over the dark waters, she couldn't shake the feeling that something still lurked beneath the waves, waiting for the right moment to strike again. Saltwater Cove would never be the same.